Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast. On this episode, we're talking to a new friend of ours, Jennifer Palais.
So Jennifer is a freelance creative and cultural strategist. She does storytelling that's meant to be interactive and not interruptive.
Essentially, what we were able to do was have a conversation with someone about our mutual hate for commercials.
That's right. So Jennifer is one of the first people that we got to talk to that really understood our whole standpoint on a lot of different things, especially brand storytelling. On the part that you can't just do it once, you have to be able to sustain attention over a long period of time.
Right. And this is essentially at the top of the funnel of where you're going to grab your consumer base, is if you're the people that are most engaged with the content you're producing.
Right. So this is a great conversation. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's coming right up. And if you want it via audio, there's plenty of options for that as well. Enjoy the show.
Enjoy.
So we're in conversation with Jennifer Palais. Jennifer, we usually start off with you giving us a little information about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I am a strategist. At the moment, I'm freelance, but I do creative and cultural strategy as well as comms planning for different brands, usually through an ad agency or a production company, and sometimes on the branding side.
Yeah. Great. So we weren't really introduced, but you did comment on one of our posts on LinkedIn. And
right.
For anybody that's listening that's like, hey, I want to get on their podcast, there's a couple of different routes. One, you could contact Chris Johnson, who's now our official podcast guest getter. He's just out there trying to pitch us as much as possible to get on the podcast.
Impressive.
Or you could follow us on LinkedIn, either Jack or me, and then comment on something and share something. And if I think that it's worthwhile talking to you, I'll reach out. Yeah.
I am so honored, by the way, that I made it through those qualifications. I appreciate it. Now, what you stood out so much to me was you were talking about, we bonded over the hatred of commercials.
Right. Yeah.
So anyone who hates commercials is a friend of mine. That's all I have to say. I don't hate them. There are some really good commercials out there. When I love a commercial, it's a ridiculous love. Because when they're done well, it's like, how did they do that well? Like the whole strategy is smart and the integration is smart. When it's good, it's absolutely great,
Yeah.
But when it's bad, it's horrible. So.
Right. Yeah, I think it affords us the opportunity here to kind of clarify when, commercials are parasites, which was something that we said, that was a post that you commented on. And the clarifying factor there is that a lot of commercials are very much like, I'm trying to hijack the attention from something that you're already watching, and I'm trying to tell you about my amazing product. And because you're focused on the content, you're going to automatically pay attention to my message, which is not the case. People don't do that. No. And for anybody out there that has a brand that's thinking, oh, well, my commercial's not going to be like that. It's going to be, people are actually going to be interested in it. You just have to dig deep down and think, the last time you watched a YouTube video, what did you do when the commercials were playing? Yeah. And if you answer that question, then you'll automatically know that if you want somebody to pay attention to your content, you have to earn that attention. And
it's earning. Yeah. By adding value. And it's I guess what you're saying, Frank, what I'm hearing is that it's not so much the commercial that's the problem, it's the interruption and the assumption that because someone's captive and that they will actually be, you'll be able to take that attention and hijack it for your own purposes. But just think, like you're saying, anytime you've been interrupted, by anything, it's so frustrating, even if it's something that you want, like, just being home, we're all home right now, the Amazon person, but it's like, I know they're doing their job, but you're on a call, they could come right now and you'll hear them go, Amazon, like scream and like bang on the door or whatever. And you're like, yeah, I want that thing, but it's like, you can just quietly like place it, so interruption of any kind is unwanted really at that level.
Exactly. But it does, and it's not, once again, it's not like it's the commercials aren't bad for brand. We were just talking about this with Mike Lewis. It's not about what you really need is, if you want a commercial to be really effective, and Jack can talk about his analogy with the trailer for a movie in a second, but like, it has to lead somewhere, to expect a commercial to come on and then you automatically go like, oh my God, let me call a sales rep to buy it. The chances are, if you were infatuated with a product, say something came up and it was like, this is what I've needed. I'm really curious about this. The first thing you do is go to the website and you read up on it, and then you look for reviews if there are any, and you go through this process. It's a consumer journey, right? And you go through this process before you buy it. But if you're say it was a good piece of content, and we keep on going back to Progressive and their commercial about become your parent when you own a house, which is funny. That doesn't immediately result. If I go to Progressive's website, I might see a picture of. I'll probably see a picture of Flo, to be honest with you, right? Of the one Progressive woman. But I'm not going to get any. I can't dive any deeper into that story. There's nothing else for me to interact with in that world. It automatically goes to just sell insurance. That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, and I said this on the last podcast, which was, it's going to be last week, but it was really like 3 hours ago. But it's like, at least for me, when I'm watching a YouTube video and I get interrupted by a trailer to a movie, I'm less annoyed than if I'm annoyed unless I'm annoyed by like a commercial that I've seen 1,000 times. Like, I can't tell you how many stupid commercials I get for the Messenger app, and I'm like, I already have the Messenger app. Stop trying to promote it to me. What am I supposed to do? Tell my friends about it?
I hate that. Right.
I don't want to. I don't use the
frustrating.
Messenger app. But the reason why I think the trailer works is because it can take me somewhere else. Like, it teases my interest to, like, oh wow, maybe I should look into this movie. When is it coming out? When should I? What is it about? Like, who's directing it? There's things that I can get invited into that world with a trailer, which is why when what we're talking about with how we like to approach creative and how we like to approach strategy is as far as a company to promote and brand yourself, it comes from the content. Like, if you're going to promote something, don't promote necessarily like your service, but promote the content that you're producing, the media that you're producing.
It's a story. It sounds like it's the reason why the trailer is intriguing, and you're kind of like, okay, you're interrupting me and I'm kind of okay with it because you're offering me story. You're offering me a world. And with a movie that when you look into that world, there will be more story. You're sure of it, because there's a whole movie they've already produced, even if they don't do an amazing job of promoting it like they do with like a Pirates of the Caribbean or a Batman, where it's just, there's never ending, kind of rabbit holes that you can go down. But you're right, with something like a Progressive or, whichever kind of commercial you're going to dive into, it is usually a hard land. You're kind of like a face plant into a sale. And that is actually, always kind of you were just talking about consumer journey, and that is always a bit of a conundrum. Like, I worked on Tumi's spring campaign 2 years ago. Well, actually, it was spring 2019, so I was working on it late 2018, and they wanted to do a bit of a rebrand or an update, but they're very product focused, and they still wanted to have product in there. And we were doing a talent integration. Kravitz and his daughter, because we were talking about legacy as a strategy. So, the whole campaign was around the journey of this father and daughter. And, when you're looking for luggage or bags and things like that, it's about a journey. So we were focusing on that strategically as far as the story. But then we were looking at that consumer journey. It's like, we're telling this beautiful story of like where Lenny grew up. He was born in Eleuthera in the Caribbean, and it's really exotic. And it was a really beautiful backdrop for some product shots as well. But then how much we were really going back and forth of that. How much story do people want once they get to the website? It really is like, I want the bag looks so cool, Lenny and his daughter. I love that. And I just want the bag. So do you jump, we went back and forth a lot of like what that landing page would be like once you clicked through, because we could go down a huge amount of content story. And then, but what about when people I just want to see what these bags are, So we were able to design kind of a balance there, but it is a really important question, and probably depending upon the category as well. Because I feel like in fashion or with something like Tumi, or maybe a brand that's like a kind of not an ego brand, but it really plays to people's sense of self, like a phone, like Apple. And you really want, just tell me more about it, because it's almost like when you're looking forward to a vacation, it's like almost that's more fun, because you're just, I'm reading about where we can go, and you're just planning like a million things, and it's this journey of going there. And then you go there and the big experience is great, because that's like, when you buy something kind of expensive, you want to know a lot about it, because it kind of adds to the, that like jolt of like, whatever excitement about buying it. But then there's something like insurance, and it's like, how much journey do I need for that? How much story do I want for insurance? I'm kind of like, I'm just buying insurance. Flow is funny. Move on. I don't know. Or do like how much, so sometimes I wonder if it's a category thing. Like, what do you guys think?
Well, I think that this just ties back into the conversation that we had earlier, because it really does depend on what ends up turning into, the returns on investment the most, right? So if, say with Toomey, the example that you gave, if the return was that everybody that saw this piece or whatever the advertising marketing strategy was, wanted to go to the website, and then if they ran into more content, they were just like, done, don't care. Do you lose the sales?
They jump. Right.
Or they click off or anything else like that, well, that's a pretty good indication that it might not be the right strategy to go about it. Right. Yeah. And just in general, I think that the testing of it is a huge part of it, because we could sit there and say, all three of us sit here and saying relative confidence that the storytelling is what's going to bring people to the top of the funnel. And then after that, really our job stopped, because it's like, we got to get them here. Marketing, like how are you guys going to get those into a sale? I mean, then you're talking about consumer data, then you're talking about setup, and then you're talking about some complex stuff that in reality, like, well, Jack and I, we know people that do it, right? It's like, I'm not going to do it.
Oh, me too. No. Yeah. You got to know your strengths, The testing is so key. I just worked with an agency called Decoded, and they are so gifted at what you're talking about, that A/B testing, as far as on that creative side of messaging. So, like there's what we're talking about initially, like the funnel. So we're at the landing page and conversions, like at that level. And then there's the side on, where you have ads out in the wild, you have them on websites and all those media placements on social media and digital media. And then those A/B tests of seeing like here's the same image with 5 different messages, and seeing, what the click-through rates are on that, or, that, which is a whole other kind of testing, but that's something they're really gifted at. I was really excited to kind of have a little bit of a bird's eye view into how they were doing that. But yeah, I feel like you need all of it now, especially, you're a big brand. Otherwise, you're like what you're saying, it's a lot of guesswork,
Right. And if you could take away the guesswork, then that's the goal. I mean, that just what you're talking about with A/B testing remind me a lot of the conversation we had with James Kinlosh, which was like they were going as far as doing testing with the actual layout format of the video itself. So whether or not it was going to be 4:3 or if it, square format or anything else like that.
Oh, that's so great.
All the way down to like the different types of colors in the background. If I remember correctly, it was pretty extensive. And, it's like, well, what's going to work, what's working here and everything. And once again, as we continue to do this podcast and as we continue to talk about this whole outlook keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and more and more complicated, because it's like these little tiny details mean a lot.
They're
Actually,
huge.
is that a Denzel Washington movie, The Little Things, is coming out soon? Talking about movies, because it really does. It ends up becoming like this huge thing where you're like, okay, well, it might matter significantly on click through rate if the background's red or blue.
Yeah, it
for
does.
a whole bunch of psychological reasons.
Well, and depending on which audience too, you're talking about, because maybe like a older rural audience would like the blue, and city younger folks would like the red. Like I'm making it up, but it's like also that's my job where I come in, is trying to eliminate as many unknowns as possible from that creative and cultural standpoint, and getting to know your audience. Who are we trying to talk to very different, like going from progressive to like Toomey, or like someone for a movie or whatever, so you really have to understand your audience, and you can get pretty niche now, where it does seem like we're creating content specifically, for a lot of different audiences, because like a movie could appeal to a wide range of audiences, but depending on how the trailer is cut, like you're saying, you have to know where you're serving that ad and what that audience wants specifically. So it can get cut a lot of different ways.
And that's not necessarily the first step you have to take of what other size business you are to, and at some point we will introduce you to Tom Kennan. That is on my to-do list.
Oh yeah.
He's got his head down in consulting with CBD oil. No, CBD. Anyways, it's some agency out in New York that he's helping. No.
Okay, never mind. Yeah, that's the only one I know.
So
letters.
And we'll make that introduction, but that's cool. Essentially like like what we keep on talking about over and over again is like, you have to start somewhere. And for a lot of these companies, and we've talked about both of our frustrations in trying to get people, not even if they buy into, a story world, or they buy into Transmedia or any of these other words and stuff that we keep flying around, even if they buy into it, do they even understand what it is? And at the end of the day, I'd love for you to tell the story about what you guys did with Hyundai and how at the end of the day,
you just flagged it. I'm like, oh, I have a story for that.
Yeah,
remember,
where they don't even understand why something was a problem,
so painful.
And there has to be, and what Tom, when we finally resume those discussions, is going to be like, well, you're never going to be able to go in and take down this whole strategy, this way of marketing down with just commercials and everything down from the top and completely overtake it. You're going to have to show some proof, and find somebody to take it on. But this little tiny small budget to really just kind of express, like, look at this, look how much we could possibly do if you were to give us a little bit more. Look what we did with this little chunk. But anyways, so
no, it's true. It is, you said it perfectly. I mean, it can be a lot about budget, but like this, sometimes a bigger budget just means more money to blow on something that you don't understand, because it's still amazing. This is why I worry about driving over bridges. I hope engineers are more accurate with what they do than like how we are in marketing, with everyone going, sure, those numbers work out, and then like the bridge. I mean, obviously it's different. Like 1 and 1 is 2, but like in our industry, I mean, I cannot tell you how many people had to sit at that table and be like, yes, good idea, many multiple millions of dollars in media, iHeartRadio, very smart people. I have to preface with saying, like, I love Hyundai's Smart Park commercial from last year's Super Bowl. It's like my favorite commercial of all time. So these are great, really, really smart marketers, and they get it right a lot of the time. And I think they've moved the needle with the young audience so well. I think they've done such a genius job. Because just from where they were, like when I was a young person, like they missed my generation completely. Like I have such a vision of what that brand means, that's hard to move that. So you do have to get them young, and they figured that out with investing so much in the music sector, which is, where that adding value to this group of young people whose attention that they want. So they really are doing a great job with that. That's where I, came in with the project between iHeartRadio, Hyundai, and Imagine Dragons. This was 2015. And Imagine Dragons is huge, but they, every band kind of has a moment in time. They had just done the Target commercial live in Las Vegas. And like, it was just a big moment in their, kind of trajectory with hits and everything. And, iHeart came in and kind of helped broker this deal with the agency I was working at the time, which was Greenlight Media and Marketing, where they were really, the whole strategy for them was bands and brands. So bringing those two together, so they had such a strong foothold in the music industry. So they were really able to kind of get those, deals made in a way other agencies were not able to. But we were doing that, and I should have looked this up before. I'm forgetting, it's been now a number of years, but I'm forgetting the name of the car. It was a new car that they were promoting, and they wanted to do something special for the launch. And they came to us at Greenlight, and with iHeartRadio, like I already had like a huge media budget. We wanted to do a live show, and the kind of strategy behind it that they had was discovering new places, because this car had kind of it wasn't that new at the time. They kind of missed the mark. It came out a little bit later, but they were highlighting all these kind of special features of just being able to, now I don't even know, like, when you just plug in, like, to find your car to get driven around, like plugging in addresses and locations and things like that, which you can do on your phone now. But at the time it slightly missed the mark, but it was that idea of like, this car is going to take you to new places. So we were trying to find like where in Los Angeles is new that hasn't been discovered before, and that was the whole strategic exercise as well. But where they were going to do a live show, and the excitement around it would be, and it ended up being Clifton's, which is a place in Los Angeles that was open like for 50 years and then closed down for 15. It hadn't been seen. It was being renovated. And the creative director's wife actually read about it, like, oh, it's opening. And it was opening like a week before we were supposed to have the show. And so we called them and we were able to broker a deal like, hey, can you delay the opening so we can have a show there? And that'll be like the first time anyone's seen it in 15 years. So that was like the new discovery. And it was absolutely magical. It was perfect. This place is small, it's intimate. And we were going to have super fans and in 4 different cars driving around the city looking for clues. So that would be broadcast on iHeartRadio and then also on Twitter. So that you could find those clues, like as the super fans found the clues, we'd post them. And then people online could start to try and figure out where this secret show was going to be, And so the whole thing was hinged, like absolutely hinged on the hashtag, which was destination unknown. So, because we don't know where it's going to be. And you want to be able to look up just that hashtag to find out the story that morning of like where, oh, we found a C, we found an N, and then they could call in and win tickets, for iHeartRadio. So it's a little bit complicated, but it's not that much, So my agency was responsible for like putting together this side of it. They knew they wanted something about new destinations. It was going to be a live show. We knew that. We knew there would be some sort of like more fun kind of like, scavenger hunt type thing around it. But we kind of turned it a little bit more of like an alternate reality game, sort of scavenger hunt, And so it turns out I think I'm the only one that really understood what was going on, because the day of, I should have known. So I'll back up. One thing was our very, very talented creative director just wasn't familiar with Twitter. So even to understand the basics of like how the messaging comes up, I showed him on the phone, like how hashtags work and how it's like the most recent, and then people can kind of follow it, and he was still like not believing me, even though I was showing the real Twitter, like this is real. Like, here's the hashtag. Do you see how this is happening? So I had a designer kind of mock up a wireframe of Twitter, and I made up destination unknown hashtag tweets as how like it could possibly go on that day. And then that made more sense, but I should have known at that point that this was going to be like, this was more difficult, but it was one of those things that was so easy to me. Like, it was like, how much the sky is blue. Like, how much do I have to say more than that? Don't we all, we see it, right? You don't even think that could go wrong, like at all. Right. So that's why it was like so shocking, because it didn't even seem like it could be a possible problem. So the day of this event, so I'm downtown at Clifton's, like I had like a kind of like a home base, was managing, we had Hyundai's social media team there. We had Imagine Dragons social media team on my phone, because that's another thing to learn, is that no matter how much they promise, talent will always promise that they will have a person with you, which is what you need to make it really work, but they will never do it. So you have to kind of always have backup for that. I learned that lesson too. There's a lot of things you learn, but that I could kind of work around a little bit more and fake that a little bit, because the super fans were going to be like texting the band for help with clues and things like that. So I needed them to respond right away. But anyway, so at headquarters, 6 a.m., I am looking up the hashtag just to be sure that no one had hijacked it for any particular reason. And I see like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of tweets of bad jokes with the hashtag destination unknown. That before that day, I have chills just thinking about it. Before that day, there was nothing. There were like 5 tweets using that hashtag. I mean, I checked it for a long time, to avoid this, because that's the thing I was looking out for, was like, maybe it would catch, someone else would use it, because you can't really do anything about that. That's kind of the excitement, of something live. And that was communicated to them, but that something could go wrong, not from internally. So then I get to the root of it, and at like 2 a.m. or something, one of the band members tweeted, "Hey, if you want to try and win tickets to our secret show, to a hashtag, use hashtag destination unknown with your favorite bad joke, and we will pick someone." So that meant that whole day was trashed. Like, that means all day people are doing that. No one would ever be able to follow online and find clues, like at all. Like, the whole thing we had, I mean, this is $1 million of a morning of just production. I mean, like probably $50 million of media. It was going to be broadcast. The show was broadcast live in Times Square too. So we had crews in Times Square. I mean, it was a huge, huge deal. And I'm like, I'm going to have a heart attack right now. Like, I'm going to die. Like, what am I going to do? So I call our account person, who is responsible for basically like babysitting the client all day, sitting there with them. I knew they would be there at the show and whining and dining and like glued to their side the whole day. So I had to let him know, in case something happened, he would be the first hit, basically. He's the first line of defense. And I call him up and I'm like, "Hey, okay, I'm just trying to be calm, but this is what happened. The hashtag and the jokes, and oh my God." And then there was a long pause, and he's like, "Okay, so what would you like me to do? What can I do?" And I was like, "Oh my God, he doesn't know what I'm saying." Right. Like, it was so clear. He didn't comprehend it. He knew there was a problem. He had no idea what I had said, not just because I was freaking out, but I was like, I mean, anyone who understands, like, our business, even a little, someone hijacked our hashtag. Boom. What? Like, I mean, if I was on the receiving end of that, I would have don't know what I would have done. Do you know what I mean? But he didn't get it. So I was like, nothing at all. We're fine. Just wanted to let you know. So do you see the breakdown? But this is millions of dollars. The CMO of Hyundai, this is a world company, like a huge, like a worldwide global organization, was like, "This sounds good. We'll do this. We're putting our money behind it. We're putting our brand behind it." Someone told iHeartRadio something. I was there. I heard they didn't understand it, but they said, "That's great." They told Imagine Dragons, "There's something with the hashtag that's really important. You should do something with that." Do you know what I'm saying? Right. Like, because they did not understand, because those guys don't, it's very hard to get an artist to tweet something. You know what I mean? So they had to twist their arms, use the hashtag somehow. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's important. We need a lot of tweets that day. Did not understand what we were doing. Let us spend money on 4 different camera crews to go around the city collecting clues for no reason. Like, do you know what I'm saying though? No reason, because the only reason we were spending like $1 million to drive around the city was for people to follow along online and call iHeartRadio and say, "Hey, we think it's this. Is it at like club something? They found a C and a U or an I or whatever. Like, is it at Cliff House? They found a C and an I, like, or something, And like, I was there helping the radio station with like, their radio's explaining it perfectly. It's on our case study. You can hear them. They're like, they're driving around the city to find, looking for clues. So you guys can listen in and call at the same time. Like, we have this whole thing going. It was really well explained. I think they just ended up handing out tickets to whoever called. Like, it was like 20 tickets or something. Only like 150 people could fit in Clifton's. It was a really small show. I usually don't get I don't get starstruck or anything because I'm just working. But then when they were rehearsing, I'm like, oh my God, they're right there. Like, they're 20 feet from me. They're like right there, you know? It was like the fans were crying, you know what I'm saying? Like just bawling. Like it was like, these were super fans. It was such an amazing, it was the most amazing experience like I'd worked on. Like it was the most rewarding and the most disastrous, like at the same time, you know, because, and you know what? I waited all day because I knew what was going on. I am in my element live. Like I love it. There's something so exciting. Like we were collecting content on the ground. They're sending it back to me through Dropbox. I have a designer with me. We're looking through images. We're picking stuff. We're giving stuff to Hyundai to post. I'm working with them. I have a team. Like I was handling the whole thing. I love that, you know? And even like the CEO of our company was like, oh my God, like I didn't even know he was there. Like, I didn't know where he was. He was in a table somewhere behind, but he was like, watch the whole thing. I got like the nicest letter ever of like, you were amazing. And I was just in the back of my head, just waiting for the shoe to drop. No one ever said anything.
Yeah,
the
right.
hashtag, no one checked it. Like the CMO wasn't like, let me just check that hashtag I paid like, you know, $60 million for or whatever. Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Nobody, not one word.
Right.
I was the only one.
Yeah. And this comes back down to, you know, people's lack of understanding of social media in general, right? Because
oh my God,
businesses and brands are just like, this is another TV.
You're right. Yeah. Oh, thank you for saying that. That is true. It's true. And it's hard. I think I used to get angry. Because I would describe it so much. And also like, if you don't this is the thing, the depth of not understanding is deep because even when it's explained to them, they don't know that they don't know still. Right. Yeah. I think that's the thing. It's like, they think I'm like, just ask the questions. But the thing is about that whole experience, this is the first time, not the last time that it happened, but the first time that it happened is with a big, I'm telling you, like, you know, for pre-pros for a commercial, you know, the book is this thick and it has the boards, it had everything. And people have been through it a lot at this point. The pre-pro for a commercial, they're like, got it. Okay. Flip. Yeah. Okay. 2 days. We're done. That's what we're going to be doing. And it's a pre-pro should be an hour at the most usually, you know? So this time, and this is at Hyundai headquarters in Orange County, I'm with the team. There were 50 people there and people on the phone. I don't even know how many people on the phone going over the pre-pro book that was this thick and all that. Yeah. And it was like, the things we're shooting, all right, Times Square, great. And then social, 2 hours, still answering questions. This is how we're doing it. And I'm happy to do that, you know? And then like the CEO like leans over to me and he's like, we have a meeting upstairs. Can you come with us? You know, it's like, it was like the big kids meeting upstairs. They were like, we're scared to go alone. Like, please bring the one person that knows what's going on. And it wasn't the one person, it was me and the production company. I actually recommended that production company because I knew that they could pull this off. And it's just so disturbingly clear when somebody doesn't understand this because others came in and like, they bid for that job too. And I was the only one in the room at that point who really could see that they didn't get it. You know, I was very fortunate that they went with the right company because that wasn't going to be my decision. But, but that would have been a whole other kind of mess. But, you know, I went upstairs and was able to answer the questions and stuff. But that's the thing is like, they did ask good questions, but they still couldn't, you know, like, I lost faith almost at that point. I was like, I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? Right. And then the next time we did it, I had them put in the contract, like, can we put something about the hashtag in the contract this time? It's not going to do anything. I mean, that's the other thing I learned with talent is like, they're going to do what they want. Like, we need Lady Gaga at Intel. Lady Gaga does not need us. And the same with Imagine Dragons, you know, and they're just like, we want her to do this and we want her to do that. And it's like, I want a lot of things, you know, like I'm not getting any of them. And I'm sorry, I know you're paying what you're paying, but you're not going to get them either, you know? Right. Yes, she agreed to 10 tweets. She's doing 7. I'm sorry. Are you going to sue her? You know what I mean? The contract is really like kind of, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just doesn't even stand up. But at least I know now, like these things can go wrong. But I'm always scared. I'm like, what else can go wrong that I think is, what else am I assuming? I guess is where I try and start, you know?
Right.
Well, if you ever do work for Gatorade, we have the perfect hashtag for you.
That's-
Gatorade
Oh.
keeps us going.
Yeah, well, nobody's ever used that.
No one's
hashtag.
ever used that.
No, that one's new. Well, that's so hard to find something hashtag wise that's not being used. And then when you have something like that was the shortest project I've done, like in terms of on that production side of like a lot, some like the Intel project that we did was a year in planning, so you're going to pick a hashtag a year in advance. Like, who knows what's going to happen with it, right? You have to be prepared for that. This was a month, start to finish, literally. It was a whirlwind. And that is, you hope that nobody hijacks the hashtag. You don't expect it to be your own team. Friendly fire.
Yeah, right. But at the very core, right? Because I can feel people having heard that story still not really understanding what the fuck we're talking about.
I tried to explain it.
Yeah. But at the core, right, because they hear hashtag and people think that people know what a hashtag is. Hashtag is pretty self-explanatory.
Right.
And what the whole coordination part of this Hyundai thing was, or anything else with Intel, anything. The coordination of this was the idea that you have this story happening in real life that's also existing on social media, that's also existing on television, that's also existing on radio.
Thank you.
And this is Transmedia. When I mention Transmedia at networking events, networking calls, this is kind of what we're talking about, right?
Absolutely.
Where people are going to want to have the simple, easy, go for solution, and they're going to get the results that come with that simple, go for it solution. Where you have this basic knowledge of Facebook that people post things on Facebook, and that's the end of the knowledge. And we're not even talking about when to post on Facebook or what gets the most traction on Facebook. We're not even talking about that. So get that out of your head too. Yeah. We are literally talking about utilizing or using Facebook as another platform, but using it in the way that it's meant to be used. Social media has social in its name. And so you have to be social on it. And that's why it's such a weird oxymoron that people post ads on those social media sites, because it's not social. It's the opposite of social. It's a presentation.
The opposite.
Right.
The opposite. The worst.
And so what we're talking about, and the reason why we're so excited to talk to Jennifer, and the pre-podcast episode or pre-podcast episode. You can't find that episode, but pre-podcast conversation.
It was more or less.
Yeah, it was like an hour and a half, and then when I talked to her first, it was another hour and a half. Is because it really takes a unique perspective on this. Not a unique one, but just a simple understanding as to what you're trying to do. You're trying to keep your audience engaged with your brand constantly, as much as you possibly can. So,
and in a fun way, like adding value. Like Imagine Dragons is something like this audience wanted. We didn't even talk about Hyundai at all. Like at the end of the show, people could get, like, they were handing out cupcakes with a Hyundai logo on it. That's all you saw. You don't see it in the content. You don't see it in the show. You don't see banners. It was super subtle. It was a very subtle. It was real content. So you have to give them credit for trying. They trusted. I mean, that's another thing. I think when people don't understand this, they're trusting so much that someone does. They're like, someone understands it. They don't know who that is. They really don't, but they're just like, I guess somebody understands it. They sold it to us. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, and then on my team, like, I don't think I don't expect to be the only one that understands it, but it's about engagement, and it's about offering something of value. So it's like on iHeartRadio, people are listening to music. They want to go see Imagine Dragons. We're not trying to sell them a car directly. It's a very offering value so that they get to know the brand in a kind of different way, and then earn, like you'd said, earn it. But like you're saying, how things are done on social is, you can keep a conversation localized with a hashtag. And especially, we didn't even use Facebook for that. We used Twitter only because Twitter's the real time app. Like that's where things are happening in real time. So I think we might have done an early morning post like, hey, follow this on Twitter, on Facebook. You know what I mean? I know the Hyundai guys did, you know, so that, but you do have to try. I mean, even talking about the production side of that and like this journey, you have to track all of that. Like it's a monster spreadsheet of like, we're posting here, we're sending them here. You're a puppet master at that point. If you're doing something live, and you really have to be able to know when you're pulling the strings and where you're sending people and why, but it is because you're getting that live engagement. And hopefully it's like telling a story in a new way, you know, like being able, it's such a privilege and it's so exciting if you do understand it, you know, to be like, hey, there's a secret show. We're going to give you clues. Like this is something fun to do on a Saturday morning. If you love Imagine Dragons, just to follow along on Twitter every hour or so and see if you got a new clue, you know, and there's really cool, like content that we were posting around it. And it was all clues related to like things about the band that you wouldn't know, you know? So you were learning about the band at the same time. You were learning kind of cool personal stuff that's not like personal, but just like stuff maybe you didn't know about, like when did the drummer learn to play drums, and you know, just stuff like that. So it was a really fun engagement. If you know, people, it's just that's what it just made me like crazy. Like here's also Imagine Dragons. This is like their one day off they gave to us during their tour. The singer could barely, he sounded amazing. I'm just saying it was painful for him. He was having a hard time with his voice, you know, and nobody explained what was actually going on. Do you know what I'm saying though? I can almost see it. You know, they're just like, get the deal signed, whatever. It's all that sounds complicated. Like, don't talk about that. Don't tell them about that part.
Right. What's my responsibility? I'm here to sing or anything. But I like what you said too about the joining the conversation aspect of it, because that's a huge part of social media as well. And then to even harp on this even a little bit further, because you heard the extravagancy and the labor that was put into making this one day happen, and how that really, for Hyundai specifically, is a drop in the bucket to what needed to happen to continue that conversation onward, right?
Right.
You can't just do that and stop.
Yeah.
Because then what we keep on talking about, you build all this attention. Say, go back to commercials. Let's bring it back down to real world, normal people that listen to this podcast every once in a while, right? Right, because we're talking about a multi-million-dollar thing, and everybody's like, tune this off. You know, obviously, I'm not anywhere near that. But take it from a level of, say, you post something, and you know, something on an ad on YouTube or something like that, and it does really well. People find it really funny. Let's talk about Ryan Reynolds. Here's this whole thing. Yeah. So let's talk about Ryan Reynolds and the Match Me. What was it called? Me Match?
Match.com.
Match.com. Sorry.
Match.
Me. I'm obviously not on any of those sites.
I was about to say, like, what?
MeMatch.com.
That's hilarious.
He also really loves Ryan Reynolds in Dead Man.
Right. So when I saw that commercial, I thought it was a playful satire on 2000. I thought it was hilarious. Did not cross my mind that it was commercial for Match.com. Didn't cross my mind. I don't think that the end tile was in there when I saw it. Right. Then I found out that it was. And I was like, oh, that's really, really interesting. Because that did build my attention. And you know what? Like, that's kind of a funny little thing that you could continue to build on. But the question is like, why didn't you? So you have all ad week, everybody, they're just like gushing over this thing. They're like, oh my God, it was the greatest thing. And blah, right? But then what happened after? What happened after? You had all this attention and then it just fizzles out, because that's what attention is. We have attention. We have limited attention. We cannot pay attention to everything all the time, right? And so if you want my attention, you best be doing stuff that's going to hold my attention on a regular basis. There should have been a lead off of that little short.
Once they got your attention too, because they saw how much attention it was garnering, even if just in our industry, but it can't just be our industry, you know?
Yeah.
They were getting so much attention, and then that should clue you in to keep going. Because if you look at I was just looking at recently, the app, because I love them. It's ridiculous. This is what this is what agency people do in their downtime. They look at old commercials for fun because they've watched everything on Netflix and there's nothing else to do. But you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm going to watch commercials. The Apple ads that were the PC Mac Apple ads from like 2009 or something like that, 2007 or 8, something like that, where, you know, the Mac PC, they were so funny. And there are like, I don't know, there are like 65 of them, if not more. Oh yeah. There are so many of them and they're all hilarious. And some of them I hadn't seen because I'm sure they used some probably as pre-roll. Some were actual, the commercial, some were, you know, 30, some were 60, some were 15, you know, so, but there were so many different angles on that. Once they found that and they saw that it was succeeding, they did continue the story, you know, and they weren't, you know, Apple wasn't big on social, but they were telling the story in the way that they were comfortable, which was kind of from a one-to-many viewpoint of commercials or video, you know, but people wanted that because it was so funny, but they didn't just stop like, oh, we did a good job. People liked it. And it took a year for them. I know that from the inside because I worked on Apple from the agency side. It took a year of strategizing and creative teams, like 20 different creative teams working on that to nail it. And once they did, then they were off to the races, you know, but it's just a good point of what you said. Like, it's so hard to find something that works. And we're saying all the different variables. So once you do nail it, like it really like beholden, it feels like you should try. Like, who else did a good job with that? Wyden Kennedy with the Old Spice campaign, you know, like they nailed it and they milked it, which was smart. You know, it's still being kind of mocked or you know, by other, like it lives on because they continued, you know, they went until it couldn't go anymore, which is kind of what you want to do. It's what you're trying to do. And it's like your shock is like, why wouldn't you do that once you found that it worked and you have people's attention? Like it's shocking.
Right. Well, it's unfortunate with the Old Spice commercial, the one that you're referring to, is that they did stop and then they tried to bring it back and it was like, no, sorry, bro, that's done. You know, that's
a few
over.
years later. But while it was happening, it was another month at least. Like, I'd have to look it up. But like on Twitter, that was like the first time I think any agency had done like a live ad. You know, they literally had the client in the room. They had him, they had people tweeting, they had the commercial, but then on Twitter, they had people, you know, saying what they wanted to see him do. And like, he would do it. And then they would post it like immediately. Like Old Spice was responding to people in real time, which was totally new, you know, so there's like a whole other side to that campaign that they were, you know, they were doing a really cool consumer journey thing there.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's just, if you have, and that just goes back to if you have the attention, and it's the breadcrumb thing. I mean, you know, if you're lucky enough to come up with something that actually hits with people, and you know, that's the reason why we're partnering up with Tom Kenning, because he does the insight side of stuff, and that way, more likely, the creative that we come up with is going to be something that people are actually looking for in the first place. That's the goal, so that you can have more hits than you do have misses, but you will miss every once in a while. But if you do have something that hits like that, I mean, you should be able to go into everything with the plan of how are we going to expand on this, right? How are we going to expand on this? Don't do a little breadcrumb thing and then end up at a pool of water and you're like, oh, what happened to all the breadcrumbs? You know, continue to get me involved. And we were just talking,
like I said, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we were talking to Mike Lewis about this, about that's the top of the funnel. Like, think about it as the top of the funnel.
Absolutely.
That's your audience that's engaging with you.
And that's the way to explain it. And you guys, that's what you guys, you know, whoever signs on with you as clients, like they're in such a good space because you're able to see that big picture of like, not just trying to just capture for an instant attention, but what the ultimate, like I joke about this, but early in my career, because I love the creativity of all this. And I'm like, I understand intuitively, you don't have to explain it to me, that creativity is the hook. And that if somebody is engaged and it's a really interesting creative endeavor, they will spend money eventually. Like to me, creativity is a direct arrow to sales. Like it is not confusing. That's again something strangely, like I had to learn that is not something that like on the CEO side or the CMO side, the brand side, they don't see that.
Right.
They see like the logo needs to be bigger. You need to say, buy this. You need to tell people to buy it because they won't know. Like they don't understand that that's not how conversations work, which is so strange because they're typically very gifted conversationalists and they're really great dinner companions. And so it's hard to explain that, like, you take those same kind of principles and just put them into like the communications world and you're good to go. You don't run into a room at a networking event screaming like, buy this from me, like you start talking about like, oh, I had shoes like that. I love those shoes. Like, when did you get them? Where did you buy? You just, whatever, you just start talking about, ridiculous stuff. But like, it's just, I learned finally, that I have to do this crazy, beautiful, like creative as best as I can, inspiring strategy. And at the end, basically say, and it will make you money.
Right.
Guess what? Because they're kind of are like, I don't care. They're listening. They're like, oh, great. Hyundai, great. Driving around the city. Imagine Dragons. Great. And it will make you money. That's what you have to tie, you have to put the bow on it of that because marketing and sales are, married basically. Like that's that whole, and if they don't hear that, we take it for granted. That's another one of those things where I'm like, I didn't know I had to explain this. I had to even learn that. I didn't know I had to explain that this needs to be a really engaging story. Because the way our brains work is that we only invest when there's story. So, and so you want characters, whether it is like you do the best you can for a brand, but like if you can get someone engaged in a story and the characters, however, you do that and they invest some time in it. Now you've got them because people, once they're invested, will typically continue to invest, So it's like, once you've got their attention, like you're saying, if you create these breadcrumbs, you create this story that builds on itself and that's greater than the sum of the parts, that really builds up to something exciting. Like you really do get more sales because you have given them something extremely satisfying and valuable, and that it's so hard for some, I think, and I have compassion for it now. I used to just be like, oh, why can't they see, it's like, well, that's not really helping you being frustrated. It's not helping them understand you better, you being frustrated. So I really have like gotten to the point where I'm like having compassion and being like, okay, how can I dance? Well, I'm standing on my head. I'm doing, a tap dance. Like, what else can I do? Like to make this more clear, because it's one of those things like in a kindergarten, if the kids aren't understanding, then it's not their fault. The teacher's got to figure out how to get this information through. So every audience is different. So there's even like a strategy, like I'm talking about strategy for the audience, but then, there's strategy for just selling these ideas in, and it changes for every client, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, because it just depends on their level of sophistication. You're not going to be able to kind of like have, just like, here's my deck for how I do this. It doesn't work, because some they'll be like, I know, I get it. Like some will know, but they don't know there's things they still don't know, And then there's some that like you would have to start maybe even before where that deck starts, because it's so far back, and then I think we were talking about this too with both of you guys. Sometimes it's not even, you can't do it. It's not going to be worth it.
That was the first time that when we first spoke, I told you I had a conversation that lasted 20 minutes and it was awkward. And then I had a conversation with you that went for an hour and a half. And the reason why is because people understand, if you can understand what I'm even referring to, then, but if you already think then people could look at you and go like, oh yeah, no, I got storytelling, I got people working on it. I'm like, I hope you do.
Yeah,
I don't really have any confidence you know what I'm talking about because you cut me off because you're uncomfortable talking about it because you don't know what you're saying, or you're so sick of people telling you that you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to it.
I think that's a huge part right there is like we have to it's so frustrating to me. I don't think that anyone should be allowed to be on the brand side where they have to work with ad agencies of any kind or production companies or services like that of any kind without having first worked on that side. Like I feel like and vice versa. I've worked on brand, but I understand what it's like to be myopic and not be able to see outside of your own kind of world, and it's not, I actually don't have that problem ever. I always usually have the opposite problem of like understanding too far and wide, so it's harder to focus. But I do understand that like the person I'm talking to at the brand has to impress their boss. Typically it's a CMO or something similar level, you know what I mean? A director of marketing or something. They have to answer to somebody at the end of the day for whatever they sign off on. You know, so it's like the strategy is also like, we are going to make you look good, you know, to your boss, you know, so there's some of that strategic thing going on. But I feel like on that brand side, what you're talking about is they've just never even they've never made anything. They've never seen the process. They don't know how the sausage is made. So there is always a bit of a clash of like, well, I feel like they feel like there's this whole world. How do you like you would never be a manager of strategists if you weren't a strategist yourself. So why do they have someone on the brand side managing a group that they've never done what that group does?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that is typically, I would say, 10 out of 10 times. I've never worked with anyone on the brand side who has also been on the agency side. And I think it's a huge miss. I think it's a huge miss in a lot of ways, because there's a lot of mistrust then, because they just don't know what they don't know. And you can't ask the right questions then at that point. And again, it just sets up the whole situation for like what you're talking about. You felt there was like this uncomfortability that you're like, is this fear? Like, you know, what is this? It makes it very hard to address, you know, and it's just like a lack of experience. But I think in our industry, both sides, you know, it's never going to be, you know, just like you shouldn't go to a restaurant unless you've been a server. I always joke about that. I don't think that's entirely true, because you can just be a good person and not treat wait staff poorly. You know what I mean? But like, how about on that branding side of like, ask a ton of questions. Like we can't know everything, especially in this market. I've been in this industry forever, and I just am a beginner every single day. I mean that with whole heart. Like you're talking about that. I still don't really understand how they do that consumer journey, like testing, like how they find out like if it converted at this stage or this stage. Like I kind of have an idea, but it's not my main job. And if I'm in a situation where someone asks me a question about it, I'm going to have to find out. I'm going to say, I don't know. You know, and I will ask questions constantly until I figure it out. And I'm kind of very comfortable now. I think it's hard when you're young. I don't know where it got in this country about you're supposed to know everything and you look bad if you ask questions. It's quite the opposite, you know. But I feel like just setting things up even, you know, for conversations of like, I'm just brainstorming now, just thinking about it, because we were saying, how can we get these conversations to be less uncomfortable? And maybe it can just even be set out like, hey, as a joke, like I have some rules for this conversation. Like you have to ask a lot of questions. And if I'm not making sense, you know, you have to raise your hand and say, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. You know what I mean? So that it's like right off the bat, like you could just say, I don't know how much you know and how much you don't. I get in a lot of conversations where somebody doesn't know anything or they're really well versed and we can kind of jam. So I'm going to be feeling that out. So I don't want you to think I'm talking down to you. Right. But at the same time, if you have questions, you know, because then you're partnering, then it's not like an us and them. That's a huge problem, I think, in the industry too, that I've seen for years, that where, because I think of this knowledge gap, you know, and there's so much money going back and forth. And so there has to be so much trust as a result, that there's a us and them thing going on of like the agency versus the client, you know, and this push pull, which is, I think, where the best work comes, you know, is like from that push pull. If you can trust each other and say like, we're partners in this, we're not against each other, you know?
Yeah. Well, what you just said there too was something that James Kinlosh, and I'll make an introduction there as well. I gotta, because he's out in Mexico City, and that's literally, he spent like cool. We had him on the podcast. You could hear him argue about not argue, but also see. He's like, I don't understand when that started. It's like, why can't we all fucking be on the same team?
Yeah, right.
We have to be, you know.
Yeah, he's from England, and now he lives in Mexico City, so it's a little weird.
Wow.
Just me doing his accent. I'm like, I just said he was from Mexico City. I'm like, yeah, that's right. He's from Mexico City.
No, from Mexico City.
That's a tough crossover. Accent wise.
Yeah, and then just to piggyback again off of what you said, I mean, it's tough as nails to get people to understand this. But I was just reading something, because Jack and I have an app and a tech accelerator as well. If there wasn't enough for us to do,
right.
I was just reading from this one company called GrowthX and their ICP. It's the ideal consumer profile, and it's really all about finding that first person to buy in, the people that are going to be that understand. And I've spoken when I read that, and we had been feeling pretty down in the dumps just because it's, like once you see this whole picture, you can't not see the whole picture. I can't sit there and keep on shooting.
You can't pretend.
Right. No, I can't lie to people. If people go like, this is going to work, I can't just be like, check please.
Right. No,
I can't do that.
I'm the same. You run into that. Yeah.
Right. But anyways, so we've run into a few people that when you speak to them, they go like, oh. And then I'm like, oh, and so you got to find that one person that's willing to either, if they're a smaller brand, dive in head first, 100% in, or one of the larger brands that's willing to give you a little chunk to let you grow. And that's the only way forward. You're right. No matter how many times I rewrite the website, which we've always thought was a problem, doesn't make a difference.
No, it's personal. It's personal. I was just thinking that, like, they have to trust you.
Yeah.
They have to trust you unless they understand it on their own, which they likely won't, because the trust is it's so interesting. Any person I've met in Transmedia, they're like my best friend, like all of them, all 10 of them that I've met. Do you know what I mean? Like there's not that many that understand. There's more than 10 of us, but honestly, any single person in the Transmedia world, we are all friends immediately. It is one of those things like you just know when someone gets you, and you know when they don't, and it's okay. It's not like I can't be friends, but it's like an immediate connection because it's almost like a race of people or something. It's a way of thinking that is very like specific, and when you have found those people, and when when someone doesn't kind of get it, but like everybody, I made that point. I don't even know what I was talking about, but you were saying, what were you saying? I got so lost in it because I'm like, that is so crazy that literally anybody that you meet, like, who gets it. But what what was I just riffing off of that you were saying?
I think we were just talking about how difficult it is to get people to or certain brands to take
personal.
That risk.
The personal, right? Because you're talking about the website, and it's like, it doesn't matter. Right. The website is irrelevant because if somebody isn't one of those people that's your people that gets it, but they are willing to trust you, it has to be you. Right. The relationship is with you. And so you're the brand, like the conversations that you have. Right. That's really the make or break it kind of thing. And I do think it kind of has to be a bit of a friendship. It's got to be like a professional friendship because it is harder to create content this way. There's more risk. It's not, like the Intel Lady Gaga at the Grammys. She did a David Bowie tribute at the Grammys, like powered by Intel, and the company that I worked for was the company that brokered that deal, put it all together. We did all the content, and it was a year in the making. And it was intense. It was like 8 agencies involved. We had CBS, we had Twitter. It was the first branded Twitter moment ever. And it was, so that was like a huge, huge undertaking in and of itself. There were hundreds of people on the call for just the strategy. There was like Content Collective. There was I can't even remember. There were 8 agencies total involved in a production company trying to make all of this happen. And it was all the personal relationships were the ones that made it happen, like on every level. First, it wouldn't have been signed if it hadn't been through our company because we had those ties to her actual manager, so we were able to get that signed. And then honestly, like the social media teams that where I was kind of bringing us all together, we were like, okay, like inside baseball, like we know what's going on. Like as long as we know, we're fine. But they were trying to get tweets and stuff approved the way you would get like a print ad.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I was like, this is absolutely insanity. It's like 2 a.m, like this whole document put together for their executive creative director. And, the CEO of my company is like, what do you think? And I was like, I think it's terrible. She will love it, and that was true. Like, this is dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. And it's exactly what they want, because they don't understand that even in their own company, this is not how it works. But no one checks. Again, they made a big deal of having to sign off on all the tweets. None of those tweets posted that were signed off on, because once it gets to the social team, someone at least understood that they're the ones in charge, and we can give them ideas, but they will do what they want to do because they know what the audience wants.
Right.
And they don't care what your commercial says, because they know that that doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we spent, hundreds of hours getting things approved that never posted, and no one ever checked. Do you know what I mean? Again, this time I knew, I wasn't worried.
Yeah, right.
I was like, I am not worried about this, because no one is going to call me. The CMO of Intel is not going to go online and be like, hey, I didn't approve this tweet.
Yeah, right. Well, they probably don't even know where to look.
Right.
They don't. So we're safe. It's a very crazy thing, don't you? Yeah. It's a very crazy thing.
Well, we could have gone off on another hour and a half on influencer marketing and why, for that exact reason, influencer marketing, if they do say oh yeah, write these tweets, and they write out those tweets verbatim, or even follow some sort of a script. It comes off as such.
Even if they did do it the exact way they want to.
Right, but it's so disingenuous too.
It's ridiculous. Well, we had to do that too. We had to, and I'm like, okay, that's great. I sent it to the manager, and I'm like, we know. I'm sending it to you because calling on the phone. It's like, I had to send that. I know that you're not going to do that. Just for, you know what I mean? I was like, but for me, please. You are on the contract. You don't have to, because you don't have to do whatever. You can do whatever you want. But you are contracted to use the hashtag and the link that I gave you, and then say whatever you want, which is what they did, which is great. I don't care, because I know what's important, but that's the thing. It's like, I have to kind of do this mysterious tap dance in the background, telling the client and even my own team, oh yes, they will post that. No one's going to even check. They're not going to check. I check, because, but at least someone knows what's important. I know what's important. If that they hadn't done the hashtag or the link, I would have been on their asses about it, because that's key. You know what I'm saying? But it's just very funny.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well,
funny, sad.
Yeah.
Funny.
Right. Well, Jennifer, we could sit here and talk to you all day.
Yeah.
I know, it's time.
But we're going to have to wrap things up here, unfortunately. We usually end off with you giving us some words of wisdom, anything you think that properly summarizes the conversation that we had.
Sure. I think it's storytelling at the end of the day. So we're talking about all these different platforms, and it used to be there was only a commercial to tell a story with, really, and a billboard and a print ad or something. And, that was the only way. So it's, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be so complicated. It has gotten complicated, but I do think the through line that never changes is story, So it's that's always a through line. I feel that people can relate to, if they can feel that how important that is to get somebody invested, that we're telling a story, we're doing it in different ways that are native to each platform.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
And we're doing it forever,
which
is always your point, because we can.
Right.
And we must.
Right.
It's the never-ending story, quite literally.
Right.
Or until it runs out of steam. But that's what I would do.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, great. Jennifer, thank you so much for being on with us.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
Looking forward to at some point, we're going to be in LA at some point, I'm assuming. We have a lot of people to go see, so we'll just add you on to the tour.
You have to stop by, please. Yes, please. The LA tour. I'm looking forward to it. Yes.
Right. I'm assuming we're one of the 10 people that you instantly hit it off with.
Now I have 12.
Okay, there you go.
I can add 2 more, which is remarkable. That was what was so exciting. I was like, oh, they don't like them. I was like, I know they're one of us. I'm sure of it.
Well, I love talking to people that understand our crazy brains and understand the idea of, actually building a brand story world and interactive media and all this other stuff. It really gives us validation that we at least know what we're talking about.
And it gave us an opportunity to talk to one of our people that we hope to work with, Ryan
Right.
Reynolds.
Exactly.
One of these days.
So Ryan, if you're paying attention,
If you've watched the whole podcast at this point,
the whole podcast, looking forward to talking to you, buddy.
and if you're not Ryan Reynolds and you just want more great content, we have plenty of it. A new episode, Stipulations, is coming out this Friday.
Thanks for all your support, guys.